government's not super efficient with our money. And I do believe that we should, have fire and police and good roads and things like that. So I'm going to pay the tax bill, but I'm not going to give them a bonus, and I'm definitely not giving them a tip. This episode is for entertainment and information only. The opinions expressed are not professional advice, and listening does not create a client relationship. Always consult your own qualified professional before making any financial, legal, or health decisions. Welcome back to the Healthy Wealth Experience. I'm Chris Hall, and today it's just me and you. Here's the deal. I got in this business because I love helping people keep more of their money. Whether that's a 25-year-old opening their first Roth IRA or a small business owner who's been overpaying on taxes for years and doesn't even know it. That's what fires me up. And I realized I need to be doing more of this on the show. So consider this episode one of a brand new series where I'm answering the questions I hear the most in plain English, no financial advisor speak. This is the stuff I wish someone had told me 10 years ago, 20 years ago, probably 30 years ago. Anyway, let's dive in. What's the actual difference between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA, and how do I know which one is right for me? This is a question I get like pretty much every week. So the real thing to think about is you're going to pay taxes, period. The government's going to get their share. They're going to get their pound of flesh. So you have to decide when you want to pay the taxes, right? So I typically will do a thing with people and I say, okay, you have $1, then you have $2, then you have $4, you have $8. Which one do you want to pay taxes on? Typically speaking, people will say, well, I want to pay taxes on the $1. Well, if that's the case, then they are looking at a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, which means I'll pay the taxes now, put it in after I pay the taxes, grow it then, and then over the course of that growth, all that growth is tax-deferred growth, and then when you pull it out later on in life, it's tax-free. So you're going to pay it now, and then later on, you don't pay taxes after it's grown, or you're going to defer it because you really need that tax break right now, and then if you defer it, you need that tax break now, then you're going to definitely pay it later on. That's more of a traditional IRA or a regular 401k, a 403b, et cetera. So it really does depend on where you're at, but I would just tell you that unless you're like in some ridiculous tax bracket, like a small business owner who's making $400,000 a year after expenses, I would say like, just pay your taxes now. Pay them now, get it over with. The other question I often ask people is, do you think taxes will be higher or lower 20 years from now? And the answer is pretty obvious. It's probably going to be higher. So that's the world we live in. So I keep hearing I should start investing early, but what if I'm starting late? Am I already behind? And what do I do about it? Also a great question. I would say that most people probably don't get into investing or saving for their retirement until they get probably into their late 30s, early 40s. That is an issue, right? Because the power of compound interest, the sooner you get into it, the better off you are. There was actually some math done where if you take a kid brand new, born one day old, and you put $6,500, like a Roth IRA type of a thing, and you would just put that in there and nothing else, that you could eliminate Social Security. That everybody would have enough money in retirement to live off of, that you wouldn't even have to have Social Security. So the sooner the better, obviously. If you're a parent and you're making really good money and you want to defer some of it to tax-wise, you can always put your children on payroll, and then you can put money from their earned income into a Roth IRA. Then they can start saving earlier. Of course, there's some caveats to that as well. That's kind of important stuff to, like, I wouldn't dive as deep on that right now as I could, but that is like probably like a whole messaging in itself. But I would say, like, starting as early as possible is the important thing. I think a lot of people, especially young people, they get out of college, they're like, I want a better car, I want a better apartment, or I want to buy a house. And they start putting all this, heavy bills on. And if they were to take that same amount of money that they're making straight out of college and start pouring it into the market through a 401k or through a Roth IRA or just plain investing in a brokerage account, and if they were to do that and then kind of like put off till 30 to buy the nicer car, to buy the nicer apartment, et cetera, they'd be worlds ahead. In fact, most people, if they really, really poured all their time, energy, and money into investing in their 20s, would probably never have to invest again because of the power of compound interest. But if you are starting later and you're listening to this right now and you're in your 30s or you're in your 40s, it's not too late. You just have to put more money in because you don't have the compounding effect that you get when you're younger. So it's not that you can do it, but you have to be disciplined, right? So if you're 20 and you put $50 a month away, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, right? I always tell people when you go to the gym, you don't like put 400 pounds on the bar and just go for it, right? First thing you got to do is lift the bar. So $50 a month is perfect for someone who's just starting out. But now if you're like in your late 30s, early 40s, and you're like, hey, I need to start, $50 is not going to do it. You're going to have to really put some weight on that bar. And that's the way I would say that. So What's the difference between a 401k and an IRA, and can I have both at the same time? The answer is, I'll just answer the last one first because that's the easiest. Absolutely, you can have both. There are some income requirements. So in other words, if you make a ton of money, and you have a 401k, then there's going to be some like requirements on whether you can invest in an IRA. But for the average person, especially someone who's new to investing, that's probably not going to be an issue. K is considered, it's a part of the tax code. That's the section, as the 401k is the section. But that part basically is a business retirement plan. So like if you work for a company or you own a company, you can do a business retirement plan. And the idea on that is if you're a business owner, let's say in this case, you're an employee, right? So your business owners put together a 401k plan. You're able to participate in it. Pretty much guaranteed that they're going to also participate. So in other words, like if you put money in, they're going to put some money in. It's called match. And so typically speaking, like you're looking at like a 3 to 4% match. So if you make $100,000 a year and you're investing in your 401k and you're getting a 4% match, you get $4,000 put into your 401k from the employer side. And of course, whatever side you're putting in too. So that's something I tell people, like that's the basic 101. If someone's willing to hand you free money, you should take it. Right. And then with the IRA, that stands for individual retirement account. So that's a retirement account that you would have as an individual, and you can have both. So you could max out your 401k, and then you can also max out your IRA, and they're just completely considered separate from each other. What I would say is this: in step planning, typically what we'll say is like, hey, get to your okay first, get all that match, right? And then after that, if you have the ability, I would say probably put it into like a Roth IRA. And then once you max that out, then you can go back to your 401k and start putting more money away in that too. And by the way, most 401k plans have a Roth option now. I would, again, going back to the question earlier, I would 100% say if you can get a Roth option, do it. Pay the taxes now, don't pay them later if you can. The last but not least on that thing, I would say with the Roth 401k too, is that your employer may not have a Roth option. It's very simple for them to change that. So they can go to what's called a TPA, third-party administrator, and say, hey, I want to change my documents to allow for Roth. Then they call the company that does the plan, and the plan changes it. So it's very simple to change. If you don't have a Roth option, it's probably because your 401k was started quite a while ago. Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs. Can someone explain what these are in plain English and why I should care? So the first one is like explaining it. This is where financial jargon comes in. And I think it's really hard for most people to like stay away from the jargon. And so that's what makes it confusing, because if you're not in the business, what's the difference, right? So I'd say in general, the average investor is going to be investing in companies, right? And so like how you invest in those companies is different, right? So you can invest in a stock, which basically means that you're buying a portion of that company specifically. You can invest in a mutual fund, which is a gathering, like a pool of investments, and they all are still parts of companies that you're getting an investment in. Same thing with an ETF. The only thing with an ETF is that instead of having like a full-on management team, like, I would say, they have probably like they do have still like a committee and a management team, but the average transactions are being done through an algorithm instead of like, people getting up in the morning and going, buy this and sell that and buy this and sell that, which is more like the mutual fund side of things. Bonds are fancy word for a loan. So if I loan you money, right, then I say, hey, I want 6% interest, and then I want the money back in 5 years or 10 years. That's a loan, right? Well, when you do it to a corporation, that's a bond. Or if you do it to the government, you say, hey, listen, I want to fund the local community college in my area. So you give them the money, they give you interest for that. And then at the end of that term, whatever it was decided when you started, that would be given back to you, and you get interest along the way. Okay. How much money do I actually need to start investing? Do I need thousands of dollars, or can I start with $50? So I did kind of mention this earlier, but I would say like, just do something. Right? Do something in the beginning, like get that bar out, lift the bar. You don't put 400 pounds on the bar and just go crazy with it, right? You just like, you got to start somewhere. With that being said, you also have a timeline issue. So in other words, like if you're younger, you can put away less and get that compounding effect. But if you're older, like you're going to have to put away more money. I think a good rule of thumb for people, and again, it's not perfect, but it's like without, generalized advice. So generalized advice would say, if you're younger, you can get away with 10% of your gross income. and kind of keep that as a rule. So in other words, like if you're only making $7,000 a year, $700, right? But like once you transition out of college into like a job or a trade school or something like that, and you're now making like 50 grand a year or 40 grand a year, well, now it's $4,000. And so you should just get used to always putting 10% away. If you're starting in your mid to late 30s, that number needs to go to around 15%. And that's where it can get tough, because by the time you're in your mid 30s, taking 15% of your gross income, let's say you're making 50 grand now, and you take 15% of your gross income, like now you're living on different money than you were used to living on. So I think that's the biggest caveat, is that you have to put more money in the longer you go, the later you wait. I mean,
You don't have to repeat the whole question.
okay.
What does diversification mean, and why does everyone act like it's the most important thing in the world?
So diversification is a key component to investing. And so the simple way of calling diversification out is saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So with people, when they're investing, they need to have their eggs in different baskets. What I mean by that is like, I'm a big fan of, certain stocks, like a Tesla or a Google or something like that. It's like, but I'm not going to put all my money in that, right? I'm not going to ride or die with Tesla or Apple or Amazon. I'm not going to do that, but I can believe in them. So you want to have a little bit of money in different places. And that's the diversification part. When you get into a mutual fund or an ETF, that is where you kind of run into this, like, it's the best companies in the world, or it's the best companies in the United States, or it's the best companies in technology. It's those kinds of things. That's how you reach diversification easier than trying to buy like little tiny bits of shares of different stocks. That's tougher, way tougher. That's why mutual funds and ETFs were invented. Diversification is important in the fact that if you have like all of your money into one thing and that one thing passes away, like let's talk about Enron. Probably most people don't remember Enron, but Enron was a big company. They were making billions of dollars. They were like one of the favorites on the stock market. And then they found out one day that they'd been cooking the books, and immediately that stock went to like zero. So like if you had all your eggs in that basket, you would have no eggs. So that's really the key to diversification. There's a thing called modern portfolio theory, which is really extremely boring stuff. So if you want to try to fall asleep and you can't, that's a good thing to start looking into. But with modern portfolio theory, they say that you need about 10 to 12 stocks to reach diversification. Most ETFs or mutual funds are like 200 to 300 stocks or bonds or whatever. So just using those can give you definitely more of a diversification without having so much effort involved.
I have debt. Should I pay that off first or start investing at the same time? Where is the line?
So the question of debt versus investing is a tough one. If you listen to like a Dave Ramsey, he's always going to tell you to like put away your debt first. I feel like it really kind of depends on like what your debt is, what it's doing for you, and like what the interest rate is. So if you've got an interest rate on your home that's like 3%, like why would you pay that off? Because you also get a tax deduction. If you're filing your taxes and you want to do an itemized deduction, you can itemize the interest on that loan. So if you do that, then you're only paying like 6%. If you're at a 24% tax bracket, is really like a 4% loan. But if you're in a 3% loan, you're like at 2.25% after your tax benefit. So why would you pay that off when you can take that same money and put it into the market and get, historically the market's paid between 8 and 10%. Even conservatively, in a diversified portfolio, people will say you're going to get between 6 and 8%. So why would that interest rate is fixed on the loan of your home, it's low, like you would just, in my opinion, you would keep it. But like, if you have a car loan, right? And so like, let's say you have a car loan and you didn't have any credit when you got the car loan. So the car loan's 22% interest, or the credit card is 22% interest, or really credit cards now are like 32% interest, which is absolute usury. Anyway, if you have those kinds of bets, I would try to like kill those debts as fast as possible, just because like your investment in the market isn't going to keep track, typically speaking, with a 22 to a 28, a 32% interest rate. So does that make sense? It kind of has to like balance out.
Can I go off book and ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
If you lost everything today and you had to make all your money back, what would you do? And then to second that, what are you doing now to make your next million?
Those are two questions. So we're going to have to separate those out. Just let's start with the first one first. Okay. So if I lost everything, what would I do? Now, are you talking about like if I lost everything and I'm this old?
You're right now. So all your money. So you have like your homes and stuff. You just need to remake all the money. What would you do to regenerate your income?
Honest answer?
Yeah.
I moved to Costa Rica and I sell coconuts on the beach. But no, the real answer, that's probably the realest answer of all. But no, if I lost everything and I had to start over, it would be, I would do two effects, right? So I'm still making the same amount of money I'm making. The first thing I would do is start buying smaller houses. I would buy a small house to live in. And then I would stair step out of that every couple of years into another house and take that other small house that I was in and turn that into a rental. One of the things I have rentals now, but one of the things I would have done if I could do it all over again is I would have went from a rental to a rental to a rental every 2 years, because you can buy a rental with less money down. If it's your house, it's not a rental, it's owner occupied. So you can buy with less money down. You get a better interest rate. And after 2 years, you can leave and go somewhere else. And the mortgage people don't, it's not considered, bad. It's actually fine with them. Because you're not pulling one over on them if you do that. So that would be number one, is I would make sure that I have a plan to buy a small house, live in that small house, with the intention that it's going to become a rental and I'm going to move to another house. So again, like 10 years later, I'll have, 4 rentals and a house I live in. So that'd be number one. Number two is I would definitely aggressively put money into like a Roth IRA, or try to find an option for a Roth 401k. And then you just have to, like in that case, if I've lost everything, the good news about losing everything is I also don't have any payments, right? So if I have this income and I have no payments, then I can really force myself to put money into like a Roth 401k and really push the money in there, not just like, kind of put a little bit in, but like put as much as I possibly can in. And again, like that would still, if you lost everything and you were like, I'm 54, it's still going to take you a while to get there. But I would say you could still probably retire at 70. You can invest more and you retire early. You could spend less and you can retire early. There's a lot of caveats that go into that. But just knowing my lifestyle and where I want to be with things, I would say I probably would just keep working until I was roughly 70. And that's kind of the plan already anyway. More if I can get there. So. Okay. Second question was what?
What are you doing right now to make your next million?
Hit this million. I think right now my focus is more on helping other people with their businesses, and just knowing that will like sort of not only just karmically, but also come back to me. Because like, in other words, like if I'm helping a small business right now, my focus right now is small business and tax savings. So if I'm helping a small business and I say, hey, listen, we can make these 3 or 4 moves and it's going to save you $100,000 in tax, right? Well, I want that $100,000 that you've saved. I want that to go into some sort of retirement account, defined contribution, defined benefit. That's a lot of jargon there, but just in general, like I want that to be invested. And then as an investment advisor, that's how I grow my business. So that's where my focus is, on the business and saving them money. But I know that a side effect of that will ultimately be that I'll have more assets to manage, and that'll grow my business as well.
What's compound interest, and why do people call it the 8th wonder of the world?
That's good. So what's compound interest? Basically, I would just say they asked Einstein, and this may be like a old wives' tale or something like that, but they asked Einstein what the most powerful force in the universe was, and his answer was compound interest. Because the younger you start, the more it just piles and piles and piles on top of each other. So just in plain in numbers, if you had $10,000 and you got 6% interest, right? So at the end of that year, you would have $10,600. Well, so you get 6% interest the next year. You're not just getting 6% interest on the 10,000. Now you're getting 6% interest on the 10,600. And so you could see how like it has like a multiplicative effect. It just continues to stack on top of each other. And so that's what compound interest is. You can have it working for you or against you. So I believe that if you have it working for you, you're investing. If you have it working against you, then you're looking definitely more like, having long-term loans and stuff like that. That means the bank's making money off of compound interest and not you.
The market crashed and I'm freaking out. Should I pull out my money or just leave it alone?
So I really like the question about what happens when the market corrects or crashes. So I have a completely different take on it than probably a lot of people. And I think that's one of the things that makes me a really good advisor. I love market corrections. I love market crashes because I don't use those labels. So to me, a correction is a sale. So all the things that I already like are now cheaper than they used to be, right? And when I hear crash, I think clearance, right? That's where you have to walk all the way to the back of the store and find that rack. Like everything you love is on clearance. So to me, as an investor, I want to buy things as cheaply as I possibly can. So when I hear crash and correction, I'm like, let's go. Where's our money? Can we start eBaying things? Like, can I sell the dog? Those are the kinds of things that I want to accomplish during a correction or a crash. In my practice, we always have a little bit of money set aside. I call it the war chest, but it's typically in like bonds or bond mutual funds. So when we do see a correction or a crash, I'm able to take money out of that war chest and put it into the market, because not everybody has like $10,000 or $100,000 sitting, next to the door in a bag of money. So like you have to find places to get it. So that's why we always have in a diversified portfolio, we have a little bit of money as a war chest that we can stick into the market when the market's bad. The only time that you would really be like, okay, this is a really bad deal for me, a correction or a crash, is if you are literally like 1 year away from retirement or like 1 year into retirement, right? And in that case, if you're 1 year away from retirement or you're 1 year into retirement and you're going to need that money to live on, then you need to become instantly more conservative. So you should take whereas I said, like if you're younger, maybe we have 20% of your portfolio in a bond market thing. So that's our war chest. But if we're retiring, like we want to have like 3 years of expenses in that same war chest. And so that way we can ride out any really terrible market.
What's the biggest mistake you see people make with their money that's completely avoidable?
I think I'll end with the exact way I sort of started, which is that I think the biggest mistake is that they don't do anything, right? It's like paralysis by analysis. And they're just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. And I would just say if you're younger, just start putting money in. And of course, everybody in the world talks about broad-based market index funds, which again, like great jargon. Thank you so much for that. What it means is invest in the stock market, invest in the world's best companies. S&P 500, which is, there's a few tickers for it, but one of them is like SPY. People will often recommend that. You hear Warren Buffett recommend it. You hear Susie Orman recommend it. Dave Ramsey recommends it. But they're all older people, right? So that's a very like conservative, good and diversification of your investments. If you're younger, you should be looking at things that are still like growing more. I tell people a lot of times, take a look at a QQQ. A QQQ is the top 100 stocks in the NASDAQ. So a lot of things that you already know are in there. And it's a really great fund. If you put $10,000 into the S&P 500 30 years ago, you'd have probably about $550,000. So pretty great return. If you had $10,000 in QQQ 30 years ago, you'd have $5.5 million. So it's quite significantly more of a return. Now, is it riskier? Yes. But define risk, right? So we've already defined that the market lowering is not really risky. It's an opportunity for buying. Right. So, but let's give real numbers. In 2008, when the market crashed, right, it went down about 49% in one single year. The QQQ went down like 93% in that same year. But with that being said, the market recovered, QQQ recovered, S&P 500 recovered, and you still ended up with $5.5 million. And what I would say is, when that happens, if that happens, that's a great opportunity for you to put more money into it. And I've never really done the numbers on it, but if in 2008, when the market was down 93%, when that QQQ was down 93%, if you put another $10,000 in it, the numbers on that would be bananas. So that's what I would say is do something, right? And if you're looking for like kind of a catch-all, if you're a little bit older, like 40s and above, maybe S&P 500 ETF. If you're a little bit younger, QQQ. That's what I would say. Thank you so much for listening today. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions at all that I didn't answer today, please put them in the comments and I'll try to answer them in the next episode. I really want this to be interactive. I really want you guys to let me know what you're looking for. What questions do you have? How can I better serve you? I do also want to make sure that I'm reiterating this, taxes are huge. And so I am looking right now specifically at trying to save individuals and small businesses as much taxes as possible. As you know, our government's not super efficient at using our tax money. So although I think we should pay taxes and then we should give them a portion of what we make so that we could have roads and fire and police, I will pay the bill. I will not give a tip. I'm definitely not giving a bonus. So if that's you and you're a small business owner and you make over $500,000 a year, and you're paying half of that to the government, you guys know how to get a hold of me. I'm happy to help. All right. Thanks for listening to the show today, guys. I appreciate it. I had a good time answering these questions. These are questions I get all the time, but there's many, many more out there. If you have a question specifically that you want to have answered, I'll throw it in the comments and I'll try to answer it the next time we do this. Also, if you are interested in tax strategies, That is something I'm very much focusing on these days, is to help people with our tax strategies, to help them pay less to the government. As you guys know, the government's not super efficient with our money. And I do believe that we should, have fire and police and good roads and things like that. So I'm going to pay the tax bill, but I'm not going to give them a bonus, and I'm definitely not giving them a tip. So if that sounds like you and you have more interest in that, like, hit the like button, hit the share button, make a comment. Let's get this thing going so the algorithm sees what we're doing. I appreciate you guys so much and hope you're having a great day.